This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
Blackbaud recently published the 2020 charitable giving report, and there's some really interesting data there, and they break it down by organization size. And in 2020, the small and medium-sized nonprofit organizations, so small would be defined as less than $1 million in revenue, and medium is $1 to $10 million in revenue, saw the largest gains and increases in digital giving. So digital seems to have really leveled the playing field for a lot of these smaller organizations where they can actually compete for donor dollars at the same level or maybe even better than some of their larger, nonprofit peers.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Tim Kachuriak, CEO and founder of Next After, a fundraising research lab, consulting firm, and training institute. Hello, Tim. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Jennifer, thanks for having me.
Before we jump in and talk about digital fundraising, I'm curious how you got started in fundraising, because most of us didn't major in fundraising in college. Would you share a little bit about your career?
Yeah, it seems like everybody that I talk to has taken an indirect pathway into the nonprofit space, and I'm definitely in that camp. So I graduated from college right after 9/11, which was a weird time to enter into the job force, and couldn't find a job, ended up hooking up with a serial entrepreneur and ended up starting a digital marketing company. And I did that for about 5 years and learned a lot about, business and getting clients and keeping them happy. And then about 5 years into it, my church was doing a capital campaign to build a new building. And I volunteered to participate in that capital campaign. It was the first time that I was doing marketing for a cause I cared about. And I just kind of fell in love with that. And so I couldn't go back to doing the kind of work that I was doing in the for-profit space anymore. So I ended up selling my business and moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and went to work for a nonprofit organization. And I've been in the space ever since.
That's a great story. I love it. You volunteered to work on a capital campaign. Bless you. We need to clone you.
I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, so it was quite a learning experience.
So on your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned that Tom McCabe taught you the theology of giving. I'm wondering if you could share more about that.
Yeah. So when I went to work for the nonprofit organization in Fort Lauderdale, we had a direct response agency. And I had no idea that this industry existed, that there's basically marketing companies and agencies that work specifically with nonprofits to help them raise money. Well, I knew a lot about digital marketing, but I knew nothing about fundraising. And we happened to work with this agency called KMA Direct Communications, which was based out of Dallas. Their CEO was a guy named Tom McCabe. And Tom kind of, he sat me down and he said, giving is an interesting experience, right? It takes the person out of themselves. And instead of focusing on their own wants and needs and desires, they shift that and focus on how they can actually meet the wants, needs, and desires of another person or a cause or something that they care deeply about that they don't directly receive a benefit from. And he described it in a way that it's fundraising in itself is almost like a ministry to people, right? Because you get to go communicate these causes that really begin to connect with a person's, heart and their wallet ultimately. And so I just thought that was really, really cool. I mean, I never really thought about it like that. And so when he shared that with me, I was like, this may be where I spend the rest of my life. And he ended up, long story short, he invited me to come to KMA and start a digital fundraising division at his company. They were a direct mail shop for 30 years. And he said, we've been trying to figure out how to move into this bold new digital world. And maybe you could help us with that. And that was kind of how I got to Dallas and got into my current career.
When we think about the digital fundraising that you're in right now, we've had a very unusual year in 2020.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But we know that still a large percent of giving is offline. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of growth you've seen in digital giving that makes it important and how that's expressed itself with clients that you have?
For sure. 2020 really caught all of us certainly by surprise. And right around the middle of March last year, which is when really everything was kind of shutting down and everybody was going into quarantine, And if you remember, like the John Hopkins little coronavirus tracker thing was always on the news, and they're showing like how it's spreading. And we do a lot of mystery donor studies at Next After, which means that we have this big like aggregate donor inbox, and it's collecting on a daily basis emails from thousands of different nonprofits. And we were getting asked all these questions from some of our clients saying, hey, what should we do? Are people still communicating with their donors? Should we still communicate? And ultimately, are donors still giving? So I went to our CTO and I said, Kevin, we've got all this interesting data that may provide some insights to some of these questions that people have. And so we created this coronavirus fundraising resource center, which basically created a series of data visualizations that actually explained, like, are people still emailing? Is email volume COVID-19 or pandemic in their communications? Are they solicitations? Are they cultivation? Or is it newsletter content? And so we had all this data that we're able to expose to the folks that are asking those questions, and it provided lots of great insights. But most importantly, we had a lot of online giving data from about 90 different organizations. And what we found is that in January and February of 2020, compared to 2019, online giving was flat. Like there was no increase, no decrease in online giving. Starting in March, and then every other month for the rest of the year, digital giving was significantly higher in 2020 than it was in 2019. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because our fundraising events were being shut down. We were no longer able to do true face-to-face fundraising anymore. Even direct mail had like a weird little, problem with the mail for a period of time. And so digital was really the nonprofit's lifeline to their donors. And so a lot of people were really leaning into that. And that's why we saw, some of the trends that we saw in the data.
Wow. Yeah, I know it's growing rapidly. My soft spot is for the smaller nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that, to define it, is, a place that's raising maybe $1 million, maybe $10 million. So they have a little bit of sophistication because they're managing those kind of funds for donors, but they still have tons of trouble with everything, the resources, sometimes to the point of just getting those acknowledgement notices out, that it's not automated in the database. And I'm kind of curious, they don't want to be left out of an important trend like digital fundraising. What advice do you have for them? What should they focus on? Like, how do they get in the game?
First of all, what's interesting, Blackbaud recently published the 2020 charitable giving report, and there's some really interesting data there, and they break it down by organization size. And in 2020, the small and medium-sized nonprofit organizations, so small would be defined as less than $1 million in revenue, and medium is $1 to $10 million in revenue, saw the largest gains and increases in digital giving. So digital seems to have like really leveled the playing field for a lot of these smaller organizations where they can actually compete for donor dollars at the same level or maybe even better than some of their larger, nonprofit peers. So my advice to smaller organizations, if you really want to get in the digital game, the first and most important thing you need to focus on is growing your email file. Out of all of the pieces of data or all of the recommendations I can give you, the number one leading indicator of any organization's ability to raise money online is the size and quality of their email file. So focusing on that is a great place to get started.
And when they have those email donors, can you tell me a little bit about the stewardship? I know you're collecting, all of this different these pieces that you get from nonprofits. What kind of stewardship, what kind of program should they expect to run?
That's such a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it because that is often the thing that's overlooked. I mean, one of the things that makes digital fundraising less effective is that the barriers to entry are very low. Like anybody can just go and start blasting their email donors with emails, right? And first of all, I hate that term blasting because, if anybody talked about blasting me, I probably don't want to have anything to do with them, right? But the overlooked aspect of digital is that we're not doing enough to actually deliver value back to the donors. We're not reporting back on the impact of their work, but it's so easy to do. So I'll share with you, we run lots of experiments in our fundraising research lab, and I'll share with you one that I think is really, really insightful about how powerful cultivation can be online. So we were working with an organization. They came to us and they said, hey, our digital revenue has fallen off a cliff. And not only that, but our email engagement is falling off a cliff. And so we looked at a 6-month snapshot of data. And what we noticed is that they were sending a consistent volume of emails every single month. But when we started to look at the responses to those emails, what we noticed is that they had a consistently higher percentage of people that were actually deleting the message before opening versus opening and reading the message. And even though that was occurring, they did not take action based on that data. They did not actually pull people off of the file that have said, hey, I really don't want to hear from you anymore. And they said, well, we can't do that. We have very, very stringent revenue targets that we have to hit. So we need every single person. We just need to keep blasting. And we looked and they were sending 2 appeals per week, which seems like incredibly, high volume, right? I mean, that's a lot of, fundraising solicitations, 2 a week. We said, you need to stop doing that. And they said, no, we can't. We have these revenue targets. We said, okay, fine. Instead of sending less email, we want you to send more. We want you to add an additional email every single week, but this email cannot make an ask. All this email can do is deliver value back to the donor. It can share with them a report of impact. It can ask the donor a question. It can provide them a link to other content or resources, but it may not make an ask. And they said, okay. So we ran the experiment for 6 months. And what we found is that their overall email engagement increased by about 65%, right? Across all of their segments of donors, non-donors, and lapsed donors. Across every segment, they also saw increased levels of giving as high as 25, 30% based on the segment. And that was by simply just adding this additional cultivation, just showing the donor a little bit of love and giving them something of value back as opposed to just making another ask. So that's one thing that every organization can do. You can use email as a means to be able to report back to the donor and give them, some value for the giving that they're giving to you.
One of the things about digital that I've always thought had an advantage over other forms is that you can deliver in so many different ways. And one of the things that has come out of the pandemic is I've heard stories about nonprofits delivering content like small groups over Zoom talking to the program director, which never would have happened before. That's because right. They wanted to do big glitzy thank you events and things, but that it's such a powerful message and donors give because they want that impact. Mm-hmm. And digital has that option. You can do Zoom, right. You can do video, you can do graphs and charts and
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And like everybody really got significant training and digital communication through this whole process, right? We've all been given a violent shove into digital transformation, whether we like it or not. And so, I mean, it's interesting, like watching my parents and stuff on Zoom and like having these Zoom conversations with their friends and family that live in different areas. And they never would have done that before. But like now it's just like so, kind of old hat and expected. So that's good. We can lean into that.
I am glad for that, for sure. It changes everything. Our field in prospect research has always been national and global, and we don't have geographic density for the profession. So it's nice that we can communicate digitally. It's always been an advantage. So if someone is doing some casual digital fundraising, like they have a donation button, they send emails. Well, how do you feel about multi-channel, right? Should they only talk to them on digital, or how should they pull it into their entire program?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. So one of the things we've been looking at over the last several years is the migration path from single channel donor to multi-channel donor. And by now we should all know that multi-channel donors are by far the most valuable donors for any organization. They have the highest retention rates and they have the highest annual donor value. And of course, what I mean by multi-channel is a donor that gives at least one gift online and one gift offline in a 12-month cycle. Well, what we've looked at is what channel is the best channel to move somebody into multi-channel fundraising. So we looked at like online acquired donors and we looked at offline acquired donors. And here's what we found. Based on a subset of about 50 organizations, we did a little benchmark study. And what we found is that online to multi-channel has a 209% higher conversion rate to multi-channel versus offline acquired to multi-channel. So what I think this illuminates is the potential opportunity to create a digital first fundraising strategy. What I mean by that, the old way that we used to acquire all of our donors is we just drop lots of pieces of mail in the mail, and then we wait for the donors to come in, and then maybe we'll send them some emails if we get their email address later. I'm suggesting we do the opposite. I suggest that we actually use digital and Facebook ads and search engine marketing and social media to be able to acquire these donors. and then as quickly and as appropriately as possible, move them into the mail stream so that they can actually have this multi-channel relationship with the organization, which data proves leads to higher conversion to multi-channel donor.
So just to give you a hard time about that, I couldn't agree with it more. But there's some challenges with that.
Mhm.
So if I bring people in, and let's say I do it all the right way, so to speak,
Mhm.
and I'm doing some social media stuff and I'm pushing people to my website so that I gather their email addresses. How do I connect? So sometimes there's a struggle with the data, like connecting the email person with the person who does the snail mail. There maybe their name comes up differently, or I end up with duplicate records. How do you manage that with clients?
Well, and that's part of the reason why I think digital has a higher conversion rate to multi-channel, because like when you acquire a donor online, by default, you get the postal address and the email address because it's required for the transaction. When you fill out the payment form, they make you give your email address and your postal address at the same time. When you acquire a donor through mail, you get their postal address because you obviously mailed them, so you have that. But very rarely do people fill out that email field for some reason. And we've had organizations that have tested all different ways of doing it. The best they can do is actually decrease their giving conversion rate. So like, you messing with the email, sign up thing on a direct mail response device is not the answer. So I think that's part of the reason why I think it's really important to think about that, is because you're going to get two rails of communication from the very beginning: email address and postal address.
So before I let you go, I'm wondering if you have any resources you're willing to share with fundraisers and researchers who want to do a better job with digital fundraising.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, we have a fundraising research lab at Next After, and we do about 4 to 5 mystery donor studies every single year. And we publish the results of those in research journals, which are all freely available on our website. We've also performed over 2,600 online fundraising experiments across a whole range of different organizations, and all of that is open source on our website as well. In addition, for folks that want to go deeper, we've developed 8 different certification courses, and everything from email fundraising optimization, landing page optimization, copywriting, Google Analytics, et cetera, which is all available online as well. So check out nextafter.com if you want to access any of those resources.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing with me today.
Thank you, Jen. It's been so fun. I appreciate it.
That was Tim Kachuriak, CEO and founder of Next After. And did you hear what he just shared there? His firm publishes all kinds of crazy, amazing content. I strongly urge you to visit nextafter.com/research, because on that page you can browse and read and download the results of Next After's research experiments and studies. There are so many studies that they have a filter you can use to make choices among topics such as recurring giving, mid-level donors, year-end giving, and more. And on the experiments side, you can filter by organization name or topic. So happy researching! Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.